Before we start, can we just get one more round of applause for everyone at the university for making this possible? It's a lot of work, y'all. Mm-hmm. Many emails, many follow-ups, many text messages. Very thankful to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. Oh my goodness, Kimberly Drew. That is unbelievable. And then when they told me that I was going to interview, I said, what am I going to wear? Oh my God. That was the most stressful thing right there. But anyway, I'm glad you're here. Wow. I don't know where to start beside the fact that we were in Massachusetts together and I probably saw you at TJ Maxx.
Probably.
I know, right?
Definitely. We were both, so I went to college at Smith College in Western Massachusetts, and we realized when we were kikiing earlier that we were both in Northampton at the same time.
At the same time.
But this big.
I know.
And you know every other person of color. Like, yes. It's very intimate.
Right. And it was all because of Nikki. When we said Nikki, you said like, oh, she was that mine. Yeah. And I was living on a farm at that time, but that's another story. Yeah. Girl, it was wonderful.
Yeah, we'll sidebar.
Mm-hmm. So Kimberly, I don't know where to start besides asking you first what you told me to ask you later, which was, how did you know when your wings were strong enough to fly away from the Met?
Yeah. So my career is one that I've never been a person who had a 5-year plan. I think that there have been so many incredible mentor-like figures in my life who are like, please just... What do you want? How can we help? Mm-hmm. Where are you headed? What's on the horizon? And there's so much that by virtue of the kind of work I'm doing, so a lot of my work happens in the digital space, which is, as we see every day, ever changing.
Right.
So you can't anticipate anything. Like, I just joined TikTok this week and it has personally changed me.
Oh, wow.
But there's all these ways in which the platforms are changing, the work, and then the work that you're doing especially as a social media manager, day to day changes so much. All that to say, the decision that I made, which is a mixture of my own kind of like, good posture decision making, and then also just matter of fact, to leave the Met, came in a moment of incredible weakness. I had been at the museum for 3 years. The first year I had incredible mentorship. My first boss, Taylor Newby, who was the first social media manager at the Met. And he had come from a background of doing corporate social media. So he used to be at Barbie, at Pepsi, back when companies were hiring PR to do their social before bringing it all in-house. And so he was the one who really built out the Met Museum on social media as this kind of like pop cultural icon. And so I got to come in, he's also a Virgo. So I got to come in to all of these systems that were set in place, and he really gave me the tools I needed to succeed. When he left, he was like, it's all yours now. And for a year, I did both of our jobs.
Wow.
And it was incredible because I didn't have to answer to nobody. I could take things and make the systems work in the way that I wanted to. I could put forth my agendas in ways that I felt really capable to do. But after a year of doing it on my own, I was so exhausted emotionally, physically. It was a moment where I was in such a bad state that I literally thought my career was going to be over because I just couldn't emotionally bring myself to do the work anymore. I was fortunate enough to get a new assistant who was also Virgo. There's a story here. And she came in, did incredible work with me for a year. I left her for 3 months to go on like a book sabbatical. And in that time, she decided to quit. And so when I came back after my break, I was like, I'm not doing this alone again. As much as I loved the work that I did there, as many opportunities as it gave me, and it came with its own grievances, of course, as well as with any job. But getting back after taking time away, I just knew I didn't have that same fight anymore. And the importance of the work deserved more. And then also for me to then take on and champion the things that I personally wanted to see, I knew I needed to go. But it took me, this was November 2018 was my last day there. It took me admitting to myself that this was one of the moments in my career that there were so many successes, but there have been so many successes, but this was a moment where I truly had to quit something. It wasn't like, peace, I'm out. It was like, I'm done.
Okay.
Like I can't go on.
Drop the mic.
Yeah. It was just like, this is the time.
Wow. So now let's go on to where you say Black art is not rare.
Mm-hmm.
Elaborate.
Yeah.
Because it isn't. And in my life, I know it's not rare.
Yeah.
People come of color here, and sometimes they don't think there's any Black art. And then I go, come here, let me show you.
Right.
You know, almost like it's crack. Come here, let me, and then you're right there. right. And then they're happy leaving. But for the rest of them, it's Black art is not rare.
Yeah.
So tell me your portion of this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like, did anybody watch The Proud Family? You know that episode
They're not gonna
where
admit it.
yeah. There's an episode of The Proud Family where this teacher's like, there's no Black history. And then they have this whole episode where it's like, like everything through his, and I feel very much in that kind of tradition. And I don't know if we still, this is a picture of me from my college graduation. I don't know if we still have the clicker. Oh yeah. Can we show yes. So this quote is one that has always kept me really motivated. It's Dr. Carter G. Woodson, incredible scholar of African-American history. But he says, if a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. And I feel like, especially in the realm of Black art and Black creativity, there is such a high potential for extermination, such that we're just not taught to look at our artists.
Right.
You know, even with the Harlem Renaissance, that's why when we were on the sidebar, I was like, what kind of African-American studies department do you have? Because the Africana studies department that I came out of, there was no art.
Oh.
Like some of my advisors would come and sneak in and be like, here's this Lorna Simpson, sis, like very that, like where they're like, come back around this corner.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways in which, even if you are super immersed in Black culture, as, from the things that we're taught in our homes,
right,
or in the things that we find in academia, the visual arts, the performing arts, we're just scraping the surface.
Yes.
And the way, and I think choosing the words that it's not rare is really that, where there's so little that I've done in my career that's actually revolutionary. And that's always my gripe with people, where it's like, if I was championing any other type of art, it would just be me championing any other type of art.
Right.
But because it's Black art, it's this whole other like momentum and energy, but it's that rarefication that happens to us, that limit of imagination about what we can do, what we accomplish, what we have accomplished, where we're headed, that I'm just like, it's just not that deep.
Right, right. And it's amazing because the art that we have here, and this is the plug I always make sure that for everybody who comes through my tour, to let them know that every piece that we have here, except for one artist, are all in the Smithsonian. You've got that's a validation for some, okay, they're in the Smithsonian. Oh, so this must be real art. But I think in one article, you talked about living artists. Now we have the dead artists, the dead Black men, but we've got all of these wonderful alive artists that are not known. How are you making that possible, or how are you pushing the card so that people will know them?
Yeah, it's a mixture. I think in the work, so in 2011, I started a blog called Black Contemporary Art, and I started it really, most selfishly, because I had finished an internship at the Studio Museum in Harlem, got there, realized immediately how little I knew. And it wasn't even information I went seeking for, but even, to circle back on the note of like Black art being so rare,
right,
I was just like, there is this whole universe that in some ways I'd had glimmers of, because I grew up in New Jersey. My aunt was very invested in the Newark arts community. So there were names that I'd seen forever, but didn't ever register the importance of,
okay, which
is cool in its own way, where it's like, it doesn't have to be this whole like song and dance. But being at the Studio Museum and being in the position to be an intentional learner, it sparked a fire in me, especially once I became an art historian, because I started studying art history and immediately realized, because we Smith struggles from the same thing. There's no African-American art professor. There's no Africanist on campus, period. Or at the time I was there, we started interviewing them when I was leaving. But there's this way that it just feels so out of reach and out of touch. And so through the work on the blog, it became kind of this casting the widest net around what it means to be an artist of African descent. So it was, the Henry Ossawa Tanners, but then it's also like, Kari Ricks, who's a young artist based out of Newark, New Jersey. It was just like any artist that I realized, or the committee of people that were working on the blog realized were Black, it was up.
Yeah.
And that for me that's how it's done, where it doesn't have to be a really laborious work. I respect so much the work that scholars do to really inscribe people in history. But I think especially in the age of social media, there's such an ability that we all have to invite people to participate in Black culture, which of course has its own other levels we can talk about later. But I think that for me, in the way that my brain works, I hate keeping stuff to myself.
Yes.
And when I find something that I like, I need to share it. And for me, the encounters that I had really early on in my education, more my kind of like higher education, going to see Kehinde Wiley paintings that were all over the ceiling at the Brooklyn Museum, it changed me. Like it changed my makeup. And so for me, it's just like these little seeds that I'm leaving.
Right.
And not, I don't curate exhibitions. It's just, I want to make sure that there can always be an opportunity for primary encounter with artists at whatever stage and scale. And with living artists, it's even more incredible because you can interview them, you can ask them, you can start to build the lore and oral history around them today.
Right.
Invite people into that dialogue as well. And it's super special.
Yeah. It's funny, you could ask people about, who name 5 artists, Black artists, and they're going to probably give you the dead ones, right? But naming 5 that are alive, that's a different story. And I've seen that, and because I'm a children's literature specialist in Black children's lit, you see the illustrators who are artists, who have pieces in the Smithsonian and every other museum across the country, and people still don't know. And they're still calling it kitty lit, or these are kid illustrators or whatever. And you're like, no, these are real artists. This is a side gig almost, So I see the spirit of Black art everywhere. I was taught art is everything. Black art is too, and you to me represent, someone who's celebrating Black art all the time. And I appreciate that. I do it on Facebook. I bring in, did you know this is so-and-so and he's Black? Leroy Campbell's from South Carolina. Leroy Campbell. And I love his work, and so-and-so's from so-and-so, just so people could be aware, because like you, I can't not share. I just love it. There's a piece that I was telling you about anxiety. And there's a portion of the director you mentioned about the Nina Simone documentary. And he asked her what freedom is. And she says freedom basically is no fear. How do you feel about freedom?
Ooh. Light questions tonight.
Oh, girl, have another sip.
But one thing I will say, just per your note before, I feel like it's really interesting, the divide between like real artists and then people who are doing like work for trade. And it's just like all these things, like these labels aren't serving us really. There should be the freedom to be able to bounce through different zones. Because I think that that's also what helps, the more and more natural that those, the flow between those two or whatever multitudinous worlds happen. That's how those names become household names.
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes there's so many Black great writers that we know by name.
Right.
But the artists who are right there, they're the contemporaries. But because, you have someone, oh my God, now I'm blanking on his name, who did all the, Aaron Douglas, who was doing all these illustrations during the Harlem Renaissance, illustrating all these Alain Locke covers and all these things. And so there's such an incredible rich tradition of being a really complicated participant in culture. And I just wish that those things were more regulated, because especially the divide between like commercial work and fine art, like actually gives me a headache.
Right.
And I don't think it serves us at all. But at any rate, that's my rant. That
was a good one.
What is freedom? And I guess it does start to answer freedom too. I think that oftentimes, especially in moments like these where, this isn't the first time that people are really focusing on African-American art. This isn't the first time that people are looking to the world, looking at at diversity and trying to think about how to either be revisionist or, in a more virtuous way, be more thoughtful about how to tell more inclusive and diverse stories, right? But we are in this moment where, I don't know. I think the freedom is the ability, one, to understand that I don't know. I feel my freest when I understand that I'm in chronology. I think there's points in my career where people have been like, you're the first or the only. And they first and the only the shit out of Black people. And I'm just like, that to me is like the least.
Well, that takes away this page. No, I'm just kidding.
The least free thing ever. Like, I don't think of freedom as, and of course it's no fear. And like, to be on the Nina tip, sorry, my gears are working, but it's the community aspect. It's the understanding that you're not alone. It's the understanding that like, I am doing the work that I'm doing so that the people who come after me have less work to do.
Right.
And for me, I feel a duty, especially to understand like who did the work for me too. That for me is freeing. Yeah. Because then I have a better vantage point of where I actually am and what is to be accomplished without the, big headedness or getting gassed up on like this exceptionalism. Yeah. For me, the freedom is like a moment to rest. And there's a collective that I always shout out called called the Art Hook Collective. And it's this mix of young queer people of color who use social media much like I did to produce work, share work. They had all these different themes and they continue to work across the kind of creative gamut. But seeing them come up, that was freedom to me. Yeah. Where it's just like, oh, you guys are in my direct lineage and we're doing very different things. But what a gift it was when they came on the scene. I was 25, 26, that there was already a generation after me that I could see the wake of the work that I was doing. Right. That's probably, and then, it's no fear again, where I'm just like, no, like we're in this together.
That's right. That's right. And I still think that we can look back, we can look forward. I love the artists that are out now, but I love the artists that were, past. And then you can say, oh, well, Romare Bearden, that's an influence, and then I think about Romare Bearden and his crew. He had Jacob Lawrence, he had his cousin Charles Austin, but he had Albert Murray who was writing about it, and then James Baldwin, all of this. And then I look at you and I've been following you for a very long time. Since you were, no, and right, that's right. But I think about looking at your crew on your pages on Instagram, and I love it. I love the spirit. Tell me, who's in your crew?
Ooh, I love my crew right now.
Okay.
We had some bumps in the road with the crew, but right now I feel really empowered. So, as Anna mentioned, back in the summer of 2016, which is so wild now, but I came up with this idea to put together a collective that we ended up calling the Black Art Incubator, and it was me. Jessica Bell Brown, who's now a curator at the Baltimore Museum of Art, Taylor Renee Aldridge, who's based out in Detroit, and Jessica Lynn, who is right now, actually, I was going to say, Delana, do you know where Jessica is? And she's in Virginia. Okay, cool. She's like nomadic in the best way possible. But the four of us came together over a summer to provide workshops interested in educating the New York art community on the arts with a particular interest in Black art and doing our best to build out programming that would feed the discourse and universe around Black art. And those women are so deeply my tribe. And I was starting to say, to think that we came together early 2016, started building out this idea, teasing it out, figuring out what types of things we would want to have on offer. And then we do the project, which is actually the summer 2016, right before the election. Having built these bonds and like building the fortitude together as four Black women in the field together has been such an incredible help and support system. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I have my wife in life, Jenna Wortham, who I've been co-authoring an anthology with for the past 3 years.
That was my next question. Yeah. So you can just flow.
Yeah. But I'm an only child and a Leo, and learning how to work with others is an uphill battle. It is those four women that have stepped in and held down and held together this project in ways that I could never begin to pay them back for. Wow. Nor would they let me.
Right, but just think what you're giving them to.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was really nice with the Black Art Incubator crew. We came back together this December in Miami. And that was kind of the first talk we ever gave together as a group was in Miami. So it was a very full circle moment and looking around the room and crying and, you know, doing the whole most. But those opportunities, I think, to be human with people, professional with people, people who encourage you to take yourself seriously, those are my type of people. And I feel really fortunate to have them.
That's good. Now tell me, you've got 2 books coming out. Like you are kicking it in 2020 with books. So tell me about Black Futures.
Yeah. So Jenna, who I mentioned, is one of my heroes, aside from being one of my best friends. She's a writer for the New York Times and has been for, I think, just about a decade now, covering everything from culture to tech. And she also does a podcast called Still Processing with Wesley Morris. Jen and I, our relationship started when Jenna sent me a DM, as you know, millennials do. And we met up for lunch and started to kick around ideas for a project together, which was really her idea. And it was just one of those moments where we were sat together at lunch and, like I said, only child Leo, but I was at the table and didn't want her to leave. I was just like, now you're mine. And this is what we're doing together. Now we're on this path together. And so basically our path, as we've designed it, is building an anthology that has tasked every person who's contributed to the book in some way with the question, what does it mean to be Black and alive right now? A lot of the work of the book is inspired deeply by Toni Morrison's The Black Book, kind of giving this broad chronology of Black history to the respective date. And for Jenna and I, we realized very quickly in our first initial conversation that there's so many ways in this moment in relationship to the internet and social media that Black culture, Black creatives are being able to be put in contact with each other in ways that are completely unprecedented.
Yes.
But also because of the ways in which we're connecting, 1, we don't own any of them. 2, they're so unsustainable because they're not being archived properly. And 3, there's not something that, is tactile. We're just both tactile people. We're very I want to touch the table. I want to smell the flower.
Right.
And so we decided to make this book as kind of an offering to both this moment to start to corral some of the voices of this time. It ain't everybody. Everybody don't go be happy with it because it's not everybody. But it's this really diverse, really queer, it's like the gayest book I've ever touched.
Wow.
But this really queer mix of Black creatives across all these spectrums of making. And that's Black Futures in a nutshell.
Wow. Next book.
Yeah. And then so because I can't do one thing at once, in my free time, I got asked by Penguin Teens to participate in a collective called the Pocket Change Collective. And through Pocket Change, they reached out to a few kind of integral figures that they'd noticed to write short essays about anything we wanted. The only ask was that it was in some way related to protest. And so I wrote a book for them called This Is What I Know About Art. And it's directly geared towards 11 to 13-year-olds. Yes. Because for me and the invitations that I get and the spaces that I find myself in oftentimes as volunteer or otherwise, I end up in a lot of academic spaces. I end up in a lot of kind of broad pop culture spaces, but a lot of time I find myself talking to young adults, early 20s up. And if there is truly change to be made in the kind of demographic makeup of people who are finding themselves in creative fields, it starts just a little bit younger. If you don't know by the time that you're getting into college, it's really hard to pivot. I was a late bloomer. I pivoted my sophomore, junior year. Junior year was taking 3-year history classes a semester. Wow. It wasn't cute. It wasn't cute. I didn't.
I'm an advisor.
Much.
I'm getting a little hyper right now.
It was a lot. And I was like, I gotta get the major because only the major will count. And just on a spiral. And so I wanted to write this book really explicitly to speak to that age group. And then also in the book, I kind of chart my general career path, but also was really invested in telling a more authentic version of the story because I got really obsessed in my career around 2015 and then especially into 2016 where I felt like it was so important for me to communicate the ease through which I arrived where I am. If I say that it's easy, then people will see themselves here too. That was the kind of rubric that I was on, I guess from like 2013 to 2015. And those years were excruciating times of political turmoil, so much violence. Like, I'm a social media manager at my job in the middle of the day watching these Facebook lives of people being murdered.
Yeah.
And to not talk about that is to do a disservice to me and the work that I'm doing. And I found myself kind of at the turn of the election realizing that I haven't been as truthful as I wanted to be because I was so invested in being this like magical Negro figure for folks.
Wow.
And so in the book, it was really lovely to go back through that time and even see myself just straight up lying on social media where it's like, that's not all that happened today. And trying to just go back and kind of not necessarily course correct, but pad it a little bit more, just to give a little bit more of a real take on all the things that are going on. And so this is what I know about art will be out in June.
Yeah.
And Black Futures is coming in the fall.
So that's nice. You got 2 books, but there should be a 3rd one because you didn't get to the kiddies.
The baby babies.
The baby babies. So if you were to do a picture book, what would the picture book be for children?
That's a great question. I was always really obsessed with Brown Bear, the Eric Carle.
Yeah.
Like, my parents are sick of it now, still to this day, like 30 years later. But I think it would be something like that, where it would be like most of the work that I do would be very image first.
Okay.
I don't know that I have the chops to write in a way that the books that impacted me the most as a child do. Or, the learning would happen. But have you seen Suliway also? Lupita's?
Of course I have. What's wrong with you?
It's so good.
Oh my gosh.
But I was like, you are that bitch. Because it's so good.
It's just breathtaking.
Yeah.
It is breathtaking.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about something else later in regards to that because I'm really angry.
Yeah.
But somebody tried to mock her. But yeah, that's
it's exquisite. It's exquisite.
SULWE.
Yeah.
It's just, it's fantastic. Yeah. But anyway,
it just came out in October, so y'all haven't missed anything yet. But Lupita Nyong'o wrote.
She just put the cherry on the top.
Yeah, and it's great. So basically, she did this talk, I think in like 2013 or 14, at the Essence Women in Hollywood, talking about being a dark-skinned woman and being just the difficulty of her finding beauty in herself, and then also the ways in which people rely on her as this new kind of figure and way of understanding their own beauty. And she writes Suliway almost dedicated to her younger self and very much about her younger self. And it's so good because it was like one of the first times that I read a book about race for children that was about race for all of us. Yeah. And not just like, hey, Black child, which I love that book, but
I know.
It's and not in the service of like, okay, everything I do has to reach all audiences.
Right. And we ain't got to preach.
Right. It doesn't have to be like going on this educational mission, but there is something, I think, in understanding a collective responsibility that I really hope becomes a legacy of this time, where it's just these things are just, like Rihanna's like, pull up. It's not just about the work that each of us do respective of our own identities. Right. Like if we really truly want to see change, and this isn't just like Hallmark card language, like if we really truly want to see change, it's about a shared responsibility. Yes. And that book, I think, really helps to ground, in many ways, a story that has almost always been exclusively told within Black households and not so much elsewhere.
Right. How about Cosby Cabrera? Is that her name? Cosby?
I don't know.
She's a Black artist. And Cabrera? Okay, we'll talk later then. Yeah. She has one, My Hair is a Garden.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not hip.
Oh, it's very, I'll show it to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, this children's book didn't have to be fiction. Yeah. Okay. If you were to teach a class. Yeah. I'm going to give you 8-year-olds on Black art. Where would you start?
Augusta Savage.
Ooh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So like they're 8. They want to have like a tactile experience.
Show them a dime. Okay.
Yeah. Or even Zenobia Bailey.
Oh.
Right?
Most people don't know about her.
Yeah.
Wow, you are something.
I think about these things.
Okay. And then where would you go?
I think building out a curriculum, I think in general, it's important to teach art in a way that is so much more than the objects. And so I think even thinking about any curriculum I would build out, it would be so much more about who the artist is than anything else. Like, so Zenobia Bailey is an incredible multidisciplinary artist, but a lot of her work that I really love is based in textile and recyclable materials. And so for that age group, it would teach them so much about the world, so much about domestic spaces, and so much about their ability to craft things with their own hands. Where I would go, I don't know. But I think it would be along those lines of just, there's so much that can be found in artists of so many different stretches. But the thing I love the most about art is when it teaches me about the world that I want to see. And so I think that if I was building out an art curriculum, it would be like that. It would be artists who really shift what you think humanity can do.
Right. That's great. So how do you see Black art in the future?
Yeah. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I think that that's the thing that excites me the most. Because in my short career, I've only been doing this work for like 8 years, and there's been such astronomical change. Even thinking about, earlier we were talking about household names or recognizing artist names. A show like Empire, which like comes with its own complications now. But season 1, it was like, my God.
Right.
To see, or even like there was an episode of The New L Word where a Kentura Davis drawing was in the set design. We're in this moment where there's so many ways in which we're normalizing and championing at rates that, are kind of chaotic. But there's so many more opportunities for embarking upon Black art than I think that I don't want to like dehistoricize, but I think that there ever have been.
Right.
And so to say, oh, this is what's next, I have no freaking clue. But what I do hope happens next on a real level is that there is a history that goes alongside it, whether that's oral tradition, whether that's projects like mine, or, whatever people dream up as ways to record, to share and propel the stories, whether that's artists themselves writing about themselves. But I think that in the effort of resisting extermination, it's so important that we're recording what's going on, because it's real cute to have market success. It's real cute to pop up here or there, but to be able to, through multiple pathways, because I don't want to like privilege any way of cognition, but to find really robust ways of making sure that we don't forget.
Right.
That for me is my big hope.
Good. Who's your favorite Black scholar? I saw you had Carter G. Woodson. So.
I have so many favorites. These are like my playing cards. I would say, I can't play favorites. But I will use this moment to shout out my sister, Dr. Sarah Lewis.
Okay.
Because Sarah is doing the most interesting work right now. She's a project called Vision and Justice, and she did this conference for Vision and Justice at Harvard. And she had this mix of people who were talking about the carceral system, talking about mass incarceration, and then also talking about creativity and also talking about technology, all sat on the same stage at Harvard University in the interest of speaking to, of course, broad audiences, but then also explicitly to Black people. And it felt like such a healing space, because there's so many of us exceptional Negroes who find ourselves in space, but we're also so proximate to these systems. And it's not just about the way that our brains conceptualize these spaces for everyone. It really is so much more intimate than that.
Right.
And watching her as a scholar hold space for everyone in that moment as like, this is the kind of scholarship that I want to do. I was talking earlier with students, and I realized in the last few years that I'd put a lot of pressure on myself through a lot of my educational journeys to be a highly intellectual person. And only recently I've been more compassionate with myself and understanding that my greatest intelligence is an emotional intelligence. And I think that what I admire the most about what Sarah is doing right now is that she's tapping into that emotional intelligence, still playing the game,
Right.
doing all the things, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's.
Right.
She's also Leo. She's like Queen Leo levels.
Mhm.
But there's an emotional intelligence that she's bringing to that work that it just feels like such a breath of fresh air.
Right.
And so she would be one person that I would pick, but there's so many. There's so many. It's so
There
rare.
are. They really are. How about your favorite artist right now?
I don't have one.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That was really good. Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, I don't want no beef.
That was really good. I was going on to talk about your art, and you've talked about your 2 books, and the third one that you're going to do for me, in dedication to Nancy.
Yes, naturally.
Please do. But and talking about for children, how can you? I read someplace talking about bringing more Black people into museums and galleries. What is your vision of how to do that?
Yeah. I think recently, and this might be completely wrong, right? So like we all go through phases of workshop and shit. I'm not saying this is the right way, but very recently I've become more and more obsessed with trying to imbue whoever will listen with the understanding that we all have a responsibility to being in these spaces together. Like every one of y'all got yourselves here, and I'm so thankful that you are here, but I hope that you'll take more people back to go on Nancy's tours. It's not just enough for us to be there and say, institution, why aren't you doing more? It's like a both and, right? Because I think oftentimes for me, I've also, like in the beginning of my career, especially, I was really obsessed with the invitation.
Oh.
And so I would do Tumblr meetups or try to find ways to give people as many free tickets as possible. Because I think that those intimate encounters are the ones that you really walk away with. It's like dining alone. Like I personally love to dine alone, but it's not for everybody. It can be such a big ask. But I think that we all have a duty to making and tailoring these experiences for our loved ones. And so that's a thing that I've been really obsessed with. And of course it comes with so much more thought about, is the space accessible? Is it set up to receive these guests? Those are the things that we can definitely, absolutely continue to put, to keep the foot on the neck of the institution to do. But I think at a very base level, it's really important that we all understand that we can have even the slightest impact on these shifts through making sure that our network feels like they're welcome.
Good, thank you. How much time do we have? Okay, sister curators. I have a good friend, Kelly Morgan, who's in Indianapolis. She's a homie. And I'm seeing more articles on these Black women curators, which is very unique right now. How do you see those sisters coming up?
First of all, we're all cute, which helps. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But it's true. I'm like, why? I'm like, someone do that in-depth story. It's like, everybody is just so fly.
Okay.
I feel like everyone in my peer group, I'm just like, how dare you? How dare you be this smart and this passionate and work these crazy hours and still look great for drinks after?
Oh my God. And be
how
perky.
You do that?
Right. And be perky.
And then also got the nerve to start families. I'm like,
okay.
You did that. You a mom too? That's crazy.
That's art. Look at her.
Right. So literally, my friend Jess, she's in Baltimore now, and her son Steele is my favorite human being, period.
Wow.
And I'm just watching my close friend, we had our first, or not our first, because she's a little bit older than me and amazing in so many ways. But my first summer in New York with her was also her first summer in New York. And we were kind of baby curators together at Creative Time, this public art organization in New York. And now she has a whole child.
Wow.
And he's almost 1. And it is so wild to watch her still do just as much work and then also keep a person alive.
Okay. Yeah. It's possible.
It's possible. I just I'm always these little things and huge things where I'm just I don't understand them. Moms, honestly, I'm just I don't understand. I barely can feed myself. And so my sister curator group and that, this exquisite, extraordinary league. And I hate, the ideas of exceptionalism or even I really hate Black Girl Magic. But I feel in a community of so many women, especially, that I'm just I don't know how many hours you have in a day, but somehow you've done all these things, and I'm so proud to know you.
Isn't it
And
amazing?
that's it, period.
Right. And that's same thing goes for you though. I mean, you're just dynamic. You're here, you're there. You see, I mean, I pull up these articles about Kimberly Drew, not Kim. And I was like, right on, be free. Kimberly Drew. And then here you are in this fantastic attire, beautiful heels, by the way. You didn't walk on them, didn't you? You just had them put on.
Well, actually, I did. So
Oh,
you're talking
wow.
about that for Essence?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, we had these Giuseppe heels. And I was like,
Yes.
first of all, these Giuseppes. And then second of all, they were like, they made me run in them. First of all, through the museum. And I was like, nothing about this is right.
That's abuse.
But a thick heel,
Mhm.
anything's possible in a thick platform heel.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and the takes that they had on you were just exquisite. Did you keep any of those clothes? That's too bad.
I know.
Okay.
One day.
I know.
Yeah.
You'll get it.
Right. So I feel like anything is possible in a thick platform heel is fabulous.
The platform heel, right.
That's like a mic drop moment. Is it okay? Would you like to take some questions?
sure,
Is that all
sure,
right?
sure.
So I can bring the mic around if anyone has questions for Kimberly. Oh, here I come in my thick platform heel.
She's got a thick heel on.
Truly, it's like
Mhm.
it's just like it's
But
a
running
game
through a
changer.
museum, really? Girl.
But the flowiness.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was a beautiful dress.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julian. Kimberly, I was really struck by the statement you made about sort of the reflection you had at the turn of the election about not wanting to be the magical Negro anymore. And I was struck by that because you said a little bit later on that we have a shared responsibility toward institutions. I know a lot of people who kind of had that epiphany about not being the magical Negro in 2016, 2017. They still, a lot of them find themselves in a space where when they think about institutions, it's kind of a burn it all down mentality. Can you share a little bit about that sort of process of coming to terms with your thinking about the world and how you've circled back to now believe in our responsibility toward institutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always been a person that loves resources. I love that these spaces, as troubled as they are, as complicated as museums are, that Renee's work is cared for here is something that I just don't ever want to ignore. That Renee's work could be in some collector's bathroom for all we know. But here it can have an audience, it can breathe. That gorgeous Sam Gilliam, oh my God, I was
Oh,
like,
I know.
I want to take you home with me.
I know.
I think that there's, for me, after all of the spaces that I've been in, I still have this like really strange optimism about institutions. And so my instinct is rarely ever burn it down. I've been more apt to say, okay, this space is no longer serving me. I've done that a lot in my career. But by and large, I still feel very spirited and very much in belief of the capacity for these institutions to do better. But I do understand also that there are so many of my immediate peers too who are like, I'm done. And I'm here for that too. I think we need both sides of the coin, because when you are working in institutions, sometimes you need the people from the outside that call all of your staff to have an emergency meeting, to have a dialogue about the things that need to change now and not in 5 years and not, during this next exhibition cycle. And so I think that it's something that's super complicated and really important for us to talk across the table with. But for me, I think just in general, I've always been invested in institutions, and also, and especially in my time at the Met, realized that I could just get a lot more done because they knew my face. I knew the way that institution worked inside and out by the time I was done. I knew the precedent. I knew why someone would tell me no, and so I could beat them to it, to better advocate for the changes that I wanted to see in that institution. But that's also, that in its own way is its own kind of like magical Negro-ness, because it wasn't easy work to do, but it's something that I knew, the institution at the time had 7 million visitors a year or something. And it's like, I want to be in service of all those people. And I took that responsibility on. But like I said, it's really on both sides of the walls.
Thank you. Another question?
Have you met Sam Gilliam?
No.
Oh, I want to
love
it. I know.
Hello.
Hi.
So I can't recall if it was a social media post or maybe an interview that you did, but there was conversation. You talked about how art, there's no right or wrong way to view art. And you went on to say, you need to find something that either moves you or angers you. And that really stuck out to me, especially the anger part. Can you talk about what angers Kimberly Drew in the art world?
Ooh, it's interesting. It's funny, I actually have like a nameplate ring that I wear that says Black Rage, just to like keep myself mad. Because I find that, it's nice right here in this moment in my career. Like I'm working my butt off, but I don't have as much on a day-to-day to be rage is such a motivating factor. I already announced I'm a fire sign. Rage gets me going. Like rage gets me to the thing. It gets me to meet my deadlines, all these things. Would things anger me now? I think anyone who cites the pipeline when talking about diversity. So they say, oh, well, we're not getting enough diverse applicants. I'm like, I will set you on fire. Especially in cities like these where it's just like, you have to go find people, like this is different because it's a university museum, but there's so many museums that are proximate to universities. And it's like, the curators aren't going to talk to the students. You guys are down the street from each other. Why isn't there this exchange that happens so that you're starting to help to guide your future peers, right? But it just doesn't always happen. Those things kind of anger me. And then, I don't know, there's some other stuff, like wall colors sometimes, just little stuff where I'm just like, why couldn't this wall just be white? Why does African art have to be maroon? Yeah, little stuff like that.
There was a question over here. Maybe we can pass it down.
Glad I didn't wear my mud cloth.
It looks great on you, sis. I'm just saying on the wall, so I'm like.
I know, right?
Hi, my name's Tiffany, and I actually sell my ceramics online. I sell it through Instagram. And I was just listening to what you said about institutions, and I started thinking about galleries versus self-representation through selling your work online. I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Many thoughts. I mean, I think it really depends on the work, the scale, the needs, the desires for success. There's a different answer for every single artist. I think, especially for me as a person who's coming into the world from a very New York perspective, we have a very, unfortunately, pervasive idea of success, which then kind of infiltrates elsewhere, that it's just like our success model doesn't have to be everyone's. But I think respective of each artist, it's really just like, what are your goals? Who do you want to reach and how? And that includes conversations about social media, that includes gallery conversations. But I don't think it always has to look like Blue Gallery or Blue Chip Gallery, the images that we're fed from pop culture about what it means to be an artist doesn't always have to be the thing for everyone.
Oh, all right, I'm coming. I'm getting my steps in.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Kimberly.
Hey.
So interesting to be in conversation with you in my hometown.
Yeah.
Kimberly and I both have similar sisters up in New York, and in service of a nonprofit organization called Recess, where she did her Black Art Incubator, where I serve as board chair. But my question, or like something I'm interested in you talking about tonight in this space, in this time period, in this moment, maybe with this audience, is about some of your other advocacy work, right? Like about what it means to be a young Black arts worker in institutions. I'm thinking about your conference keynote where you laid bare, like, what is the cost of your labor and contributions, and was it like valued or not valued, and sort of how that led other movements for people to think about wages and salaries within institutions and holding them accountable. Just offering that as a point of conversation.
Thank you, Delana. Yeah, so like I said, my greatest ideas come from rage. So when in this like flow around the Met, I'd been there for just tapping into my second year when my predecessor, Taylor, left to go actually work at Netflix. And Taylor was like, I make this much money. I told them, I told you how much I'm making so that they don't pay you less. And I was like, oh, it's like, okay. And so Taylor was making $85 a year in the role. And when I went to them and was like, okay, well, I'm going to take over Taylor's responsibilities, and then I'll also be doing my job, they offered me $80 a year. And I was like, but I'm doing 2 jobs.
Okay.
Also. But there were all these excuses, blah, blah, blah. And for a solid year, I was petitioning to get a raise, and it just never happened. And so I walked out with the salary that was. And I knew it was a thing that always kind of weighed over me. It was, it's just, and it's a great salary. And I think when I eventually announced this number at a museum conference in New Orleans, and people were like, but you're making something. And it's like, it's not the number, it's that margin. It's what it communicates to your staff about their worth. That is really my gripe.
Right.
It was more money than I'd ever made before, ever thought I could make. It put me in the position to support my family in ways that I never would have thought was possible with an art history degree. Very, very, very much aware of that. But also, it's really hard to go in every day and understand that your worth is placed at a particular number that also is lower than your white male predecessor.
Right.
Like, it starts to bug you after a while. And so I decided that when I was leaving, I got the ask from the American Alliance of Museums to speak at their conference. And I was like, this is exactly what I'm going to say.
Okay.
And I said it, and I just, it was just one of those moments of like personal release where I didn't want to say like, oh, this is a bad institution, blah, 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 but just like this thing really rode over me in a way that now I feel liberated from. This is an anger that I felt like I had to keep to myself, and I just didn't want to carry it anymore. And then after I announced that, I realized that a lot of other people feel that way.
Right.
Including the women who came together and built out the museum transparency, this incredible Google document that went around where people were posting their job titles and their salaries at respective institutions so that people could compare and contrast. And so many people have either left institutions where they were being severely underpaid, or it's helped them in their negotiation process with institutions.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, and it's just dope. It's like, I really just need to get off my chest, but these incredible women, Michelle Fisher, Nikki Columbus, they were just like, we're gonna mobilize in these ways. And it felt incredible to see that happen, because there isn't that, like what Taylor did for me is something that I think we all should be doing more often, but instead we're encouraged to be quiet, encouraged to be thankful, encouraged to be so glad that we have art history degrees and have jobs. But if we're not challenging institutions to treat us equitably, like, we kind of setting ourselves up for failure, especially in the reality of our times. Like, people, that those little corners that are cut can put so many families in jeopardy. And so I'm really happy that my moment of bravery became this movement through the consciousness and hard work of other women in the field and people who were brave enough in themselves to post their salaries.
That is great.
But never, your gripe might be someone else's revolution. Yeah, but thank you for asking that.
That was great.
There were a couple more questions.
Hey, how are you? So I am more of the burn it down variety, right? And I know you were talking about how you have some friends who are on that side as well. So I'm wondering, in y'all's conversations, what does it look like from that side? Because while some do feel that we have this shared responsibility, what I know is that when we walk into these spaces, we don't have the same shared existential weight. So to stand in front of like Kara Walker's Sugar Sphinx, right? And to be in a space where we are looking at various contexts, right? Things that are almost preternaturally understood by us, to see white people treated as a curiosity, right? I had an opportunity to go to Alabama to the EJI, to the Lynching Museum. And I was in this very, what I felt to be a sacred space. And as a practitioner of African religions, they have the dirt there. And so you know what that means to a lot of us. And to see white people walking around, period, violated the space, and it felt like a violation to me. And these are things that I don't want to have to necessarily feel when I am looking at the stuff created by my people that holds so much more philosophical weight than just as something to look at, something to, as an experience. And so I'm just wondering, for those of us who are like, I don't care for this space to be accessible, but I still want to enjoy my people's work, what is that looking like? I do it on the music end, but like on the artistic end, what is that looking like?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I don't know. I mean, I think for me, and this is not the best answer, but there's just still so much work to be done. Like, quite frankly, like, as you were talking about EJI, like, in my brain, I'm like, I would have written them a letter and just said, like, this was my experience there. And it's important for your docents to be aware that, you know, I'd snitch. I'd be like, it's really important for your docents to be aware that people are moving through this space in this way that compromise my experience as a visitor. I think that those moments of pushing back, that agency, to me feels good. And of course, with different institutions at different scales, it gets complicated. But yeah, I think for all intents and purposes, I wouldn't say if you're finding that you don't feel comfortable in those spaces, I'm not saying you absolutely have to go. There's so many spaces that don't deserve us, which is a whole other end of spectrum of conversation. But I think if you want to be there, if you want to have these encounters with this work, it's all about the strategy and how you find yourself there. And then also understanding that, like, all these things are going to be experiences. It's an experience for you too. And the ways in which people are stunned or shocked or amazed, of course, you want people to be respectful, because that's a whole other conversation, especially in relationship to that Kara Walker work. But I hope that everyone is amazed when they see work. I hope that everyone is moved to a point of joy or rage when they see work. That's one thing that I feel like across the board, no matter what your walk of life is, we all in some way deserve to find those works that really move us. But when it comes down to experience, I think there's always, you know, a choice that we all have, whether we show up or not, how we show up. You know, even with the Kara Walker work, there was a group, an action that I was a part of called We Are Here, where a group of, you know, largely femme-identified people of color came together and protested and pushed back on the ways in which people were interacting with that work. So there's always an opportunity to figure out a new way. And of course, none of these things exist outside of the spectrum of, like, the work that you're doing, the time that you can dedicate. There's so many considerations that go into that. But I think in this space that we're in right now, it's important to think about how to, I don't know, like a little optimism and a little pushback, if that's in your wheelhouse. And if not, I think it's all due respect. But I do feel like we're in a moment, especially with social media, it's like you can drag them on social media. There's more opportunities to be dialogical with institutions should you so choose that path. If that answers your question.
Hi, Kimberly. My name is Therese, and I'm a Virgo. My best friend's a Leo, so I know of which you speak.
Yes.
I love the way you speak truth to power, and I really enjoyed listening to you tonight and reading about you. I am curious, you talked a little bit about the anger side. I'm curious about what brings you joy in your work.
Yeah, platform shoes. I would say, I think, I mean, even, and now I'm just like thinking so much more about your question, but I think the people who are on the other side that challenge me to view things more in a more complicated way brings me a lot of joy. Because I think for me, at the level of visibility that I've gotten in my career, I've gotten a lot of people who commend me, but I'm also still 29 and figuring things out. And having the opportunity to learn in private brings me so much joy. So I don't have to embarrass myself, you know, like in these moments. I think it's the people who call in. That to me is such a gesture of care and love that brings me a lot of joy, just to understand like the world and the whys. Like I'm always obsessed with precedent and why things are the way that they are. And so having friends who are anti-establishment or friends who are really on a grassroots level working to make the changes that I can sit on a stage and talk about, but I'm not always in the trenches with them on it. Like, and I know that. But being able to have an ear to it, to be able to leverage my voice better in service of the work that they're doing, that to me brings me joy and dissipates a lot of anxiety.
Hi, my name is Kayla. I'm an Aquarius. My girlfriend is a Leo, so. But I do have like 2 questions for you. You can choose if you want to answer both or not. But my question was, in Black Panther, there is that scene in the museum where he says that all of this art is stolen. And I've seen a lot of articles over the last couple of days, especially at the British Museum, of, this ethical question of what do we do with this art that is stolen, returning it, the issue of presenting it, or have it be presented by the people that it belongs to, rather than as trophies of conquest. And look at all my shiny things I grabbed from the jungle. And my second question is, how do you, as a young, well-educated Black female who has a degree in the humanities, how do you even, for young people like me who are about to graduate, start to find those avenues to, start to build your career in life? I'm a theater and English double major, so double header of I'm never gonna get a job.
No,
That's
English
not true.
is great.
That's not true.
No, English is the truth. People need people who write well.
But, how do you start to find those avenues or get a foot in the door or any of those things? Just your thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Black Panther moment was so interesting because I was like, woo, people have been talking about this forever. There's so few, especially Africanists, there's so few Black Africanists. And I was like, yes, maybe this is the thing that will help to diversify this area of study. But the British Museum is just a hot mess. They're like, look at all the stuff we stole. And it's just so strange. The pathology of it, I don't know. It's someone who's above me to really explain the history of all those things. But it is interesting to see other institutions, I think the Met in their own ways, really taking the charge on repatriating works. But yeah, all of those types of things are a little out of the realm of things that I know and understand very well. But what I do know and understand very well is what it's like to be, that's why I had the other photo, me on my graduation day. I was so lost in 2012 and had no plan, had no idea what was going to happen. I still I got an empty diploma that day because I owed the university, or I owed my college $300 or $400. I rented a suit for interviews because I didn't own a suit and lost the suit.
Wow.
Because I don't know. And so I had this debt to them that ended up being the debt that got me an empty diploma. But yeah, I am definitely a person who one-to-one, the things I studied, I ended up doing. So I studied art history, I studied African-American studies, I studied museums studies. That ended up becoming my life. But there were so many bumps and twists and turns in the road. And so the one thing that I would say is just to understand that it is a process. There's still so many question marks for me right now with the things that I've accomplished, because you're part of a larger chronology. There's always going to be new opportunities, new ways of pushing yourself, new ways of finding who you want to be and how you want to be moment to moment. But I will say an English degree is really super valuable, more so sometimes than our history degree. But I think it's really finding the room for making sure that amidst all of the work that you're doing, that there's room for passion and there's room for you to remain inspired, which is why I end up finding myself doing a lot of work to I will never do too much work in terms of trying to make museums accessible. That is work that I chose that I wanted to do. And every day this challenge continues to present itself. And every day I get new opportunities to figure out how to do it better. And that's something that I do for no monies. But I know that there can be such an incredible impact from. And so I'm rambling, but it's not about magically somehow knowing everything. I had a friend, one of my very dear friends who I met on my way to Smith College when we were just babies. And she was like, I know where I'm going to college. I'm going to study art history. And now she's on this whole other path of life But for so much of our time in school, I was like, oh, I wish I could just be like Kendra and know. And we ended up like in these like swapping of places. But there, you know, as long as we are lucky to breathe air, there's always an opportunity for reinvention, and growth. And all those things, of course, exist within a capitalist system. So find your way to get your coin. But it's not always about being exactly right or exactly sure. And I think we all retain that right for a little bit of messiness.
Yeah. When did your social media account, like when did you start Museum Mammy?
I started, we got our first computer in 1996 when I was 5. So I've always been a kid on computers in some way. And I had a Twitter in like 2007, 2008, and then deleted it, which I'm so angry about because I could have had my name and then no one would call me Museum Mammy. But I started using Twitter again in probably 2012 because really like effectively because I was studying museum studies, and for my concentration, like our thesis paper, I wrote about museums using social media. Like it's very on the nail what I ended up doing professionally. But to do that work, I had to immerse myself in Facebook and Twitter to build a case about the trends that I was observing. And so that was when I really did it. And then because I was doing Black contemporary art from 2011, I had this platform that I was already building out, but it was very, because it was a group, it was relatively anonymous. And once I got my first job, I was kind of like, how did I trick all these people into letting me in? And so I started using social media to tell the story so that people could see how easy it was. Or, you know, that the galleries in Chelsea are free to attend, or this Carrie Mae Weems exhibition is coming to the Guggenheim. The momentum really built up in 2012, 2013.
All right, so hey, I'm Kelvin. My question to you, I have 2 questions, but I want to first start off by saying, so my experience has been like a Black art educator and being very interested in art at a very young age. I unfortunately didn't have teachers that really taught me Black artists. And even during Black History Month, they would always teach me about like Martin Luther King or like other activists. And then like we would have to draw them or like paint them and other stuff, but they never taught me Black artists. And Dr. Minuet Floyd, who is sitting right here in the front, she was actually my first Black art teacher ever, like my whole entire life. And I had her at the University of South Carolina, and she introduced me to Romare Bearden. And I remember going back to my dorm, almost being kind of like angry and kind of like mad at the fact that I've gone almost 20 years of my life and never have known about a Black artist. And I've like, you know, have spent all of my art years like worshiping and like idolizing these European artists. And it really like made me angry. And it kind of made me feel as though whenever I became an art educator, off the jump, I was going to like just start teaching Black artists because I didn't have that experience. So my question is to you, is that what kind of activated your activism, like to want to really like push Black art and really make Black artists prominent? Like, did you ever have a similar experience growing up, or just was it based out of curiosity?
Yeah, I almost had an identical story. I was, it'll come. My sophomore year of college, I had been so I got to school and was studying math first and pre-med because I thought I needed to do that to be successful. And then I traded math in for chemistry, and then found myself doing engineering and was just going through these like super professional, stable kind of career paths. And I was also putting myself through school. And so it became like immediately unsustainable to try to do both those things. Switched from engineering to architecture because I could have a little bit more agency over my coursework. And took my first art history class and had this like aha moment. This is how my brain works. This is how I want to retain information. I want to think in images. I want to think about world history specifically through art as a kind of medium or path towards understanding. And the summer of my sophomore year, my advisor came to me, Kevin Quashie, who's the great love of my life. Kevin said, you know, you should think about doing either an internship at the Studio Museum in Harlem or at the Schomburg Center. Oh yeah, because also while I was doing all these other majors, I finished the African American Studies major in 2 years because I was like, at least I know this is what I want to do. And so he's like, you already have this major, you can apply to whatever, people will let you in. And because the Studio Museum's internship was paid, I did that one. And it's still to this day, like gets me that $1,600 stipend is like the difference between everything, you know, me being a librarian, which I also really wanted to do at one point. And so the probably second or third week when I was at Studio Museum, I learned who Basquiat was.
Wow.
And I was like, hold it. Like, what? Where has this person been? How did I not know? What did I not see? And I grew up in a family that really privileged art and creativity and so much invested in Black culture. And there were these like names around the house of Black artists, but I was never really taught the importance of a Black art history, or, you know, like this person who made this thing looks like you wasn't really the kind of conversations that we were having. Also, because like I was brought up in just such a Black world that to be like, this is a Black artist, like whatever. Anyway, but having that Basquiat encounter moment wasn't necessarily just, it was definitely rage, but not just rage, just an understanding that I could have missed this person. And I just didn't want anyone to miss anyone else. I didn't want anyone to overlook or understate the importance and impact that Black artists have had on the history of art. And so yeah, that's been the motivating force for me since. I think everyone has their first artist where you're just like, what? You've been here this whole time. You're like Lois Mailey Jones. You've been here this whole time. It's crazy. But yeah, it made me like a really voracious learner. Because I was like, if I could miss, you know, especially like even Bearden, where you're like, Bearden is huge. You know, like hugely important artist.
Yes.
And that we might not know who he, or even Ed Clark. It's like that there could be the possibility that you could get through a course on painting and not talk about some of these works and artists is just like, dang, okay, we got a lot of work to do. Because, you know, these moments of overlooking don't happen by mistake in some cases. And then in others, it's just like, universities aren't investing in the people that are teaching the most robust versions of art history. And that's just period. So anyway, long story short, yeah, Basquiat was mine.
I am just at Fibry. I'm a high school senior, and I'm planning on going to Columbia College Chicago. For someone who is going into their next step of their life, especially with art and hitting those artist blocks and stuff like that, what are the best things to do for inspiration?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think all of that is relative to the person. I think it's really important to keep it as a priority amidst how you work to survive in the world, or, you know, how you care for yourself physically or mentally. But yeah, inspiration, I think, is just so, it's such an open question that it can mean anything for anyone. Like, I'm vaguely sometimes most inspired by the food I eat. And like, it makes no sense. Like, I've found my markets of like culture that I touch. Food is far out of that realm. But there's sometimes when you taste something and you're just like, I am transported, if only for a moment. So I think it is really relative, but I like that, especially where you're at in your life, that it's a thing that's top of mind, because I think it's, especially once you're in, you know, one of the things I really hate about college is that you are so encouraged to forget that, or to immediately think about how to weaponize it towards your future. It's never just about inspiration. It's always like, how can you monetize your inspiration? And I think keeping those things sacred is really valuable.
So I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Hi, my name is Natalie. I am also a Leo,
Hey,
but a cusp. I'm sorry. Cancer cusp.
cusps aren't real. It's fine. Go on.
It's okay. So I wish to be a future archivist. And so my question was, how do you advocate in space, like in predominantly white spaces, which Archivy is a very white space currently, for Black and also other minoritized voices to be appreciated in the way we present history, but also art as well?
Yeah, I think in the field of archiving, it's really I mean, I think it's really interesting to see how now the heat is on them in this moment of social media where it's like, no, everyone wants to know what you're hiding. You know, like people are thrilled by what's going on. I did a workshop at the younger USC, I realize I should say, in Southern California. And we did a workshop there at the One Archives, the Gay and Lesbian Archives. And it was really super fun because the group of people who came in to do the workshop, like, were barely there to hang out with me and mostly there to just like stick it to the archivist.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, ooh, I was like, ooh, like eating popcorn in the corner. So yeah, I don't know if I have necessarily a solution for that. Sometimes I think talks make you into this like false prophet kind of talking head voice. But it is a thrill that you are pursuing it as your passion. And it goes back to that shared responsibility of when you have your opportunity to invite others in, please do. And I wish you the best with it. Like, there just needs to be so many more of us in that space, opening those doors, making archives more sexy, because it is, freedom to us to be able to better understand our place within that lineage. I was saying, like, I wanted to be a librarian at one point, and if I had a smaller life, that would be exactly what I do. Right? I'm just like, yes, you get to purvey beauty for a living. Like, that's awesome. But yeah, it's a thrill, and there's so many, especially other Black librarians and archivists in history, I think, to learn from. Like, I spent so much time researching when I was going to pursue a Mills degree, and just realizing like how not lonely that field is for us, and understanding that yes, it is a majority space as it exists right now, but you have so many other people that you're carrying the torch from. Is light work. Yeah. In some ways, it's a lot of hard work, but it can be light work with the context.
That's what a major is.
What's your major?
That's right.
Oh, that's beautiful. So, we have another question in the front.
Hi, my name's Leslie Archie, and I'm actually on the board here at the museum. I'd like to know, can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So you say Black art is not rare. I worry about things like the other day, I got an email from Artsy that said, Black artists that you should be collecting now. So I worry that Black art may be at a moment, maybe having a moment, and it is being, everything is viewed through European eyes, through Caucasian eyes, and they are looking at our art now as a rarity and something to collect, and maybe at some point it will be unreachable to the masses because they'll drive the prices of the art astronomically because it's a moment, it's a thing. For us, it's our culture, it's our life, it's our story. But for them, it's a moment. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a super complicated proposition. I think the moment that is happening around the attention around Black artists is something that we all benefit from. I would rather live in a world where, every weekend I'm getting an email that's like, here's 15 more incredible Black people to know. Of course, when talking about market, it does become difficult. But I also wonder too, because artists have to make a living, like, is that the worst thing in the world? Like, of course I want work to be accessible to as many people as possible. But I think what gets lost in those dialogues sometimes is that artists are trying to make a living. The work of being an artist is in of itself running a business. And for so long, the price and value put on our work in that marketplace has been so low that to see those leaps happening, there is a small part of me that is happy to see it happening. But it is super complicated. Like in an ideal world, there would be more funding from other sources that could subsidize the work that artists are doing, that could subsidize the institutions that are hosting those works. But the reality that we're in right now is just kind of like, and then you look at artists who are doing really well market-wise, and the work that some of them are doing to make the world a better place, quite literally. Like you look at someone like Mark Bradford, who's really socially engaged, and he can do a lot of that work because of his market success. So it becomes like a matrix question and issue. And then also there are Black collectors that have a ton of money too, who can collect those works at that price. And so it's all over the place. I think it's important for people to approach artwork of people by different walks of life with the utmost respect. Claudia Rankin's Play the White Card, I cannot recommend enough.
Right.
It is so good. And like the first time that I've ever seen the ways in which the collector can be the voyeur and see the tensions that happen played out in a way that's not like me at a dinner party with someone. I think it's important to acknowledge that some people are predatory in these marketplaces. But at the same time, there's no reason that, Lorna, Carrie, maybe like these artists who are making exceptional work shouldn't be priced at within price ranges of their peers.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. But the majority of the Black artists in this museum and in most museums, they basically died paupers. Their work didn't become their work until after they were dead. So I appreciate them living and making a profit off of their art right now. I think it's phenomenal. And especially for women, because most of them were men.
Well, thank you. Any last questions? I wanted to mention that there are, sorry, I feel very strange walking around with the mic like this, but there are a few shows of African-American art coming to the CMA for students, anyone, in case you don't know. So starting in June, there's Black is Beautiful, the photography of Kwame Brathwaite, and there'll be several shows through 2022, at least one a year, focusing on African-American art at the CMA. So I just really want to thank Kimberly and thank Dr. Tolson. I think this has been a fabulous evening.
You're wonderful.
You're wonderful.